How's everyone doing? Good? My name is Chester. I'm from Bayan USA. Bayan USA is an alliance of 15 progressive Filipino organizations in the U.S. representing youth, students, women, workers, artists, and human rights advocates. Bayan USA serves as the information bureau for the National Democratic Movement of the Philippines and as a campaign center for anti-imperialist Filipinos in the U.S. The U.S. military buildup in the Asia-Pacific is a threat to peace in the region. Filipino Americans across the U.S., under the banner of Bayan USA, expressed condemnation and disgust over the efforts of the Philippine President Benigno Simeon Noynoy Aquino III to accommodate the new U.S. defense strategy that entails a so-called rebalance to Asia, including an increase in U.S. military presence in the Philippines. Bayan USA also denounces the U.S. government's Cold War-style media offensive against economic rival China as a pretext to justify its gross expansion of U.S. military powers in the Asia-Pacific in order to U.S. economic, political, and military investments in the region. Today actually marks the 113 years of U.S. colonialism and imperialism at the anniversary of the often forgotten Philippine-American War of 1989. U.S. geopolitical strategy has left the Philippines with a tragic history and ongoing reality of U.S. military infestation whose social costs have burdened its people with untold pain and misery. Why increase U.S. militarization in Asia when the war continues in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and developing towards Iran? What has continuously been the real motivator for wars? It's money, economy, and wealth for the 1%. Is that right?
Yes!
No. And China's economic growth threatens U.S. domination over the region. The U.S. economy is largely dependent on the Pacific Rim, particularly because of its export position. While the 1% seem to be the only ones benefiting from wars, the 99% of American people also paid a high price of U.S. military presence overseas and wars at the expense of our taxes, and especially at increasing budget cuts to much-needed basic human needs. U.S. military spending has increased 81% since 2001. In a report released by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, the U.S. spent $698 billion in 2010, funding 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, operating 1,000 military bases and facilities worldwide, and maintaining Pentagon's 234 golf courses. Boo! U.S. military bases in the presence of U.S. troops undermine the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of the host country. President Aquino's compliance in accommodating U.S. saber-rattling seeks to undo the 1991 landmark decision of the Philippine Senate to reject the U.S. bases treaty that essentially shut down permanent U.S. military bases, Subic Naval and Clark Airfield, by once again opening these ports for indefinite and rotational basing of U.S. troops and throughout the archipelago. The peoples around the world have been resisting U.S. military presence and called for the immediate removal of U.S. bases and troops. Some struggles resulted in the dismantling of the bases, and in some cases, albeit temporarily, the reduction of U.S. military presence. Since 1990, the mass campaigns were successful in kicking out bases in at least 20 countries, including the Philippines, Panama, Manta, Ecuador, Puerto Rico, and Uzbekistan. Anti-U.S. bases struggles continue to strengthen in opposition to the increased militarization in various countries, like Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, Colombia, and others. As Filipinos in the U.S., Bayan USA sees concurrently how both the Aquino and Obama governments, guardians of financial oligarchy, are acting in betrayal of the broad interests of the Filipino and American peoples. Just as the poor grow poorer in the Philippines under Aquino's failed economic policies, so are working people in the U.S. forced to carry the heavy burden of paying for a debt crisis they did not create. As people's resistance to the intolerable 1% escalates amidst the crisis, Bayan USA joins the call for greater solidarity between people in the U.S. struggling against U.S. military-industrial complex and for economic equality, and the Filipino people's ongoing struggle for genuine national independence and democracy. This must translate to greater efforts to expose and oppose the U.S. geopolitical strategy in the Asia-Pacific region as a scheme of the purveyors of crisis and war, to maintain tight control over the region's wealth. People's resistance and firm solidarity are key in our efforts to frustrate U.S. interventionism in the region. U.S. out of the Philippines, U.S. out of Asia, junk the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty, Visiting Forces Agreement, uphold Philippine national sovereignty, and long live international solidarity. Thank you.